We all know that Cadia is no more, broken little more than space debris. Or is it? Little did we know, Cadia still exists. A large portion of the planet is intact, likely kept as such by saturating warp energies. Fortress cities, or casas as they are known, dot Cadia's surface, as too do warbands of Chaos Astartes and legions of demons. But something we weren't expecting was survivors. Not only this, it is said the indomitable Ursarkar E Creed, prior to his doom, hid a powerful weapon he believed would see the Imperium take the fight to the forces of chaos. Let us discuss now the beasts which fight over Cadia's remains. We will look closer into those loyal servants who still survive upon this shard, and most importantly of all, the true nature of the weapon Cadia guards, even in death. But what do you think that could be? Trust me when I say, you will not expect this, but luckily, you will find out shortly. This new lore comes from the newly released novel Creed, Ashes of Cadia. So if you intend to read this book and don't wish to hear any spoilers, turn it off now. The majority of new lore from the novel is covered within the body of our video. The rest is within our conclusion, where I provide a breakdown for you. Cadia broke before the guard did. Now, before we get into the video, if you've been subbed to our channel for a while, you know that Titan Wargaming covers all new 40k lore as it's released. If you press the subscribe button and even the notification bell, then YouTube will recommend these videos as I publish them. It's free for you, it keeps you updated, it's fun, and it means you'll be a part of this community as it grows from the ground up. The community is currently a bit under 5,000 subs, and I'd love to hit 8k by Christmas. Thank you, I really do appreciate your time. The enemies of the Imperium are numberless. None, however, threaten the sanctity of the human soul in the way the primordial Annihilator does. The dark gods have plagued mankind's ascension among the stars for 10,000 years, but now there are whispers of a weapon, one to finally ensure the Imperium is victorious against the foul, corrupted servants of the Pantheon one last decisive time, and it is located on Cadia. Or rather, what is left of it. You see, Cadia broke before the guard did. That much we know is true. A tragedy that has seen these proud martial people scattered throughout the stars, their armies diluted with members from other regiments, often leading to disparate battle groups of curiously varied origin. A little known fact, one which up until now has been hidden from its people, is that, even after suffering so much at the hands of the despoiler, the planet of Cadia does still exist. And so the stage is set for Lord Castellan Ursular Creed to become reacquainted with her homeworld, changed as it has become. We must take a moment before we proceed, however, for I know some of you will view Ursula and believe she is an image of her father's daughter. This is simply not the case. You see, whilst her father Ursarkar was perhaps the greatest Cadian to ever live, he was also his people's failed defender, the man who lost Cadia's greatest battle. From a young age, Ursula sought to pursue her own path, determined to not play a part within her father's legacy. This is because Ursarkar was an estranged father to his only child. His meteoric rise up through the ranks of Cadian command meant he was at constant campaign, out of direct contact with his wife and daughter. Considering Ursula's own career accomplishments, this speaks volumes of her capability, as she has achieved all she has on her own merit. Further to the fact father and child were distant from one another, the rank and file's admiration for Ursarkar led to a particular enmity forming within Ursula, one which would burn hot deep within, until she discovered the truth of why Ursarkar had never approached her through the years. This we will speak about soon enough. Called before the Lord Regent of the Imperium himself, Ursula Creed, daughter and only child of the legendary hero Ursarkar E Creed, is respectfully asked by Roboute himself whether she will lead a reformed Cadian 8th Regiment back to her erstwhile home world. Ursula is shocked, for even though she has won much acclaim, executing successful campaigns across a galaxy split by the Immaterium, even with the knowledge as a senior Cadian officer, she was not aware that Cadia still existed in any form that could sustain life. The reason for this, some would say ill-fated foray back to the broken world that is Cadia, is to seek a cache hidden by Ursarkar Creed himself shortly before Abaddon's triumph. It is rumoured that within this cache, a bunker underneath the inhospitable Rosfar range, that a weapon made to combat chaos lays. The intelligence available to Roboute suggests this was of great importance to Ursarkar, a part of his plan to combat Abaddon's 13th Black Crusade, but for some unknown reason was not brought to bear, assumedly because Abaddon struck such a decisive blow, shattering Cadia before the weapon could be utilised. And so at the head of a newly founded Cadian 8th, Lord Castellan Ursular Creed leads her small team into the jaws of the great enemy. What must be stressed at this point is that Ursula has at her command a limited number of troops. You see, what is left of Cadia is swarming with the foot soldiers of chaos, heretic Astartes, demons, and even fallen traitorous night households now battle for supremacy on its surface. To combat such an unending tide of heresy would require a great many assets and would likely lead to a protracted campaign, risking the planet shattering further, or even worse, Creed's weapon falling into the hands of the enemy. To avoid these scenarios, a particularly specialised plan is put into place. Penal legions would be utilised to distract the enemy away from the location of Creed's bunker. Earning their penance in death, this sorry rabble would be key to Ursula's more specialised team inserting unmolested. Ursula, her own fire team of 10, plus her aide, making 11, would be supported by various squads of Tempestus Scions, who would make planetfall in various craft separate to her own. Once united on the surface, they would swiftly overcome what small amount of adversaries remained close to the cache, radio for extraction, and leave the penitents to earn their place beside the Emperor in death. Nonetheless, we all know by now that especially in the horror battlefields of the 41st millennium, even well thought out plans don't remain unchanged after contact with the enemy. Meanwhile, upon the surface of Cadia, the moment Apillionis had been aspiring to for millennia was bearing close now. The blood of Creed would make planetfall imminently, providing the Death Guard's sorcerer with the final component required for his own schemes. You see, Apillionis, or the Huntsman as he was also known, is an outcast from his own legion, for it is well known that Mortarian's sons scorn the Psyker, even within their own ranks. Given the dead who lace the ruins and indeed the very soil of Cadia, uncounted poxwalkers lay dormant, able to be animated at Apillionis' whim. Imminently, events would be set in motion that will alter the course of fate for all Cadia's children, those lost among the stars, and the generations yet to come. As a result of the Death Guard's repulsive sorcery, vast storms of unnatural making had bound Cadia's skies in an impenetrable, destructive halo of lightning. Not only did this have the desired effect of scrambling radio transmissions to and from Cadia's surface, it also scattered Ursula's reinforcements. And so, as her forces made planetfall upon what remained of their home world, all were ill at ease, for the soil they stood upon now was not that of hallowed Cadia. It was not the sanctified ground of a planet which has withstood the ravages of the arch-enemy for so many millennia. This was a corrupt planet, one which existed precariously between reality and the Immaterium. Disjointed, strung-out fire teams of valuable Tempestus Scion escorts were butchered by hordes of poxwalkers, their expertly honed skill counting for naught in the face of the reanimated corpses of Cadia's dead defenders. It would become very clear a short while after touching down upon Cadia that Ursula and her team of 11 were in fact alone, stranded upon a shard of their dead homeworld, hopelessly outnumbered, surrounded by the animated dead. It would take more than a miracle to extract safely, let alone fulfill Roboute's brief of locating Ursarkar Creed's cache. Exploring the surrounding areas, soldiers long deceased were hung or crucified, empty-eyed skulls eerily turning to track the group as they made their way across the planet's surface. Towers sprung on unnatural angles from the sides of buildings like some Gothic architectural growth, and demons fully materialized prowled the streets of abandoned casas, scrounging for what little leathery flesh still remained on long-decayed bodies. And so the small group would be pursued across the desolate surface of a planet once so noble. A particularly heartbreaking realization the newly formed Cadian 8th witnessed as they made their way through towns populated only by the dead was witnessing the fate of those poor souls left behind on Cadia. Through the barricaded buildings, nooses hung from the necks of poxwalkers, whilst churches full of family members, each with a single lash round through their skulls, told of those who'd waited long as they could before they'd realised that no rescue was coming. Rather than facing the horrors that now inhabited their world, allowing the enemy the satisfaction of butchering them, many took their own lives. The Piliona's vast hordes of demons and zombies alike would hunt down the warm-blooded interlopers across what remained of Cadia's surface. Ursula's party were relentlessly pursued by the hunter's tinny, unsettling hunting horn, corralled ever towards some unknowable fate. Despite their progress on foot, one by one their number would fall to the myriad enemies who lay between the small troop and their ultimate goal. As it so happened, when storming into a small bunker surrounded by lesser demons from all 4 of the Pantheon, inside was a long-deceased Sister of Battle. Her faith even in death had sustained her body, as she appeared as though she had just drawn her last breath. This overwhelming faith the sister must have possessed had held a powerful demon imprisoned within the bunker. Ursula's teams breaking in destroyed the bindings of the bunker, setting loose a demon you may well know, the 3-headed hound called Karanak. In another instance, a Tempestus Scion was pierced through the chest from behind by a massive plague drone, the barb protruding bloodily from her chest as the creature lifted the shocked hero into the air, her horrified fellows watching on. One other was torn apart, slowly devoured alive by poxwalkers as her flesh was parted by rotting fingertips, her screams dying away too slowly to bring any notion to her compatriots that her death may at least have been quick, as they themselves made swift their own escape. As their number dwindled, each had their own internal conflict to overcome, for there seemed no possible way such a minor force could overcome the numberless hordes before them. For most, a venomous hatred for the forces of chaos, paired with an unshakable belief in the god Emperor, was all that helped them place one booted foot in front of the other. As they searched for an intact transmission station to vox the fleet for extraction, ultimately they did want to fulfill their original brief to locate Creed's cache. The forces of Nurgle would harass the group at every step. When passing through a casa, Ursula's party spotted what appeared to be Loyalist Militarum soldiers conducting a sanctioned suicide. A group of 3 in ragged uniforms with rebreathers fitted were spotted in front of a holy basilica. One knelt and took their own life as the other 2 watched on. The 2 remaining then burnt the body in a solemn demeanour before taking the remains into the basilica and leaving once more into a dense forest beyond the fortress town. Ursula, through linking up with survivors of this community, would find out that they were called the Mole Rats, a small community of Cadians who had not given up the fight, even after the planet broke and all seemed lost. There were 36 in total. The leader was a sapper, a captain named Tethys, along with a couple militarum vets from the war, though many were orphans having been rescued by Tethys' group in the early years, now grown into adulthood, whilst the youngest of all, children and teenagers, were, I suppose, the truest children of Cadia, those born on a planet drenched in chaos corruption. Remarkably, the mole rats were trusted by Ursarkar Creed in decades past to safeguard his vault, referred to as Creed's Sanctum Interioris. Tethys had made a vow to Ursarkar personally that he would not open the vault and that he would defend it with his life until such time the Imperium returned to claim it. This must have taken remarkable fortitude, as well as unwavering faith in Creed for Tethys, first witnessing the escape craft leave behind the Imperium's people, then his small group of survivors slowly whittle away to not crack open Creed's vault and utilise the weapons inside. Ever since being told of the vault's existence, Ursula and those under her command had envisioned knights stood by ready to deliver death, rows of heavy armour the likes of Leman Russ or the famed indomitable Baneblade, at least ordnance to rain down death from afar. They were so close to unlocking Creed's weapons vault. As it so happened, the gene-coded lock would open for none other than Ursula herself, whilst even then her blood by itself would not suffice. You see, the secret cache of Ursarkar E Creed, that bunker which is said to house a weapon powerful enough to combat Abaddon's 13th Black Crusade, was guarded by more than a simple gene lock. Once the needle had pierced Ursula's palm, affirming her identity, the small team had 1 minute to decipher a further safeguard, the gene lock in the form of a servitor skull, still locking Ursula in place through the spine in her palm, provided her with a date. She must enter a sequence of numbers which relate to that date in order to unlock the vault. Not only this, a countdown from 60 seconds begun. If Ursula was unsuccessful by the end of the countdown, the contents of the vault and all below the Rosvar range would be eliminated in a trap of cautionary prevention by Ursarkar in order to ensure his vault of weapons did not fall into enemy control. To make matters more pressing, the sorceress huntsman, accompanied by his army of shambling zombies and demons alike, had found the mole rat's fortress underneath the Rosvar range and were making quick headway through the light defences. For what could 36 people do against an army of the dead so numerous? It broke against their mountain holding like a rotting, putrid tide. As the huntsman's Nurgle-gifted sorcery began to rust away the mole rat's outer barricades, Ursula used her father's journal as a reference to break the code. As the gene lock countdown reached single digits, Ursula at last was successful. The combination which unlocked Cadia's hope for a future was no birthday, no great victory of Creed's. The successful sequence was in fact the coordinates of Ursula herself, on the date specified by the gene-locked servitor. It would seem Ursula's father had kept tabs on his daughter, and perhaps cared for her more than she had believed all this time. As the massive vault door opened to lay bare its contents, the majority of space within was empty. Alone in the centre of a room was an ironwood table, a metal chair, and a lone ammo case. Within the case were a small hololithic projector, an old stylus, a data crystal set upon a length of chain, and finally a bottle containing a small remnant of a sticky brown liquid in its base. Was this Creed's great weapon? Where was the ordnance? Anything that could be used to fight the corrupt forces which now swarmed over Cadia's remains. Not a little stunned and dubious at this turn of events, Ursula sat down and played the hololithic projector, keen to understand what had been recorded upon the device. Displayed on a crystal which sat spinning at the centre of the projector was Ursarkar Creed. He sat now where she did, on the metal chair at the table within his bunker. This was the first time he had spoken to Ursula in her entire life. At first he told her of his regrets for not knowing her, allowing her mother to convince him that Ursula would be better off not growing attached to her father, as his was a career forever at war. on distant worlds much more often than at home. He stated Ursula was holding the rank of captain at the time of recording his message. He spoke directly to her over the great expanse of time. He explained that there were worlds out there now for the taking, not for the High Lords of Terror, or even for the Emperor, but for the people of Cadia, her people to claim. This vault was not built to house conventional weapons. Its purpose was to provide one final hope, a future for all Cadians. Ursarkar explained that he, along with his best friend and colour sergeant Darren, had worked for years on the contents of the data crystal now contained within the ammo tin. Upon it lay a list of systems that held habitable planets, not yet brought into the Imperium's fold. If claimed by Ursula for Cadia, their location could provide key positions for the defence of the wider Imperium. Cadia's people needed a home that wasn't a void ship or someone else's world. You are their future, Ursula. I've never doubted it for a moment. Ursarkar explained there were numerous favours she could call in, allies who would assist her with this undertaking. There were even navigation charts. Everything she required was on that crystal. Something to make up for all the missed name days, he added. How did he know to leave something of this nature for his daughter, let alone within the Rosvar range on a planet that at the time of recording most knew was likely doomed? So many emotions and questions too late to ask ran through Ursula's mind. Stunned but renewed with a vigour that they must survive in order for their people to in turn, Ursula's party made good their escape as the huntsman's corrupt sorceries rusted out the mole rat's defences, admitting thousands of shambling corrupt creatures within. Captain Tethys at this time revealed to Ursula what lay beneath his people's rebreathers and ragged clothing. The beginnings of jutting horns, postulant growths. It seemed none could live well into adulthood upon this planet without their bodies beginning to eventually succumb to the chaos corruption they drew in with every breath. Tethys explained that once a person's mind began to go, out of respect for themselves and their community, they would commit the ultimate sacrifice, and their bones would be interred underneath the basilica, as Ursula and her team had witnessed earlier in their journey. To buy time for the Lord Castellan, Tethys and his remaining people, other than 2 younger girls, opted to stay behind to waylay the huntsman's hordes. This is where we begin to reach the end of our story. By this time, the only people under Ursula's command are her aide, Gideon Argent, a haughty Cadian officer, Colonel von Haast, a young sniper named Lascari, who had only days previously held the rank of White Shield, a Catachan veteran, Sergeant Harappa, a penal legionnaire named Ossian, who was fiercely loyal to the Imperium and Ursula both, the young girl Captain Tethys sent away, and Ursula herself. There were 7. Within a final showdown against the Huntsman, Ursula's team have planted a transmitter calling for urgent extraction. The Huntsman has sacrificed Ossian, the penal legionnaire, who lay heavily injured on the brink of death, and he has also drawn the blood of Ursula in single combat. As the already bloated, corrupted form of Apelionis grows and bulges into an insectoid-like creature, the sorcerer has begun his ascension to demonhood. But though the Death Guard's sorcerer, come Demon Prince, wanted nothing more than to finish what he had started in slaughtering Ursula and her crew, Karanak, the Hound of Vengeance, would come loping towards Apelionis, the two struggling against one another. Whilst Karanak is the incarnation of Khorne's very wrathful vengeance, it is bested by Apelionis when the insectoid-like Demon Prince pins the Hound to the ground and follows up with plunging its razor-sharp proboscis into Karanak, extracting the demon's essence into its own diseased self. When the Hound was nothing but a dried husk, Apelionis again turned his attention to the mortals before him. But it was at this moment a Valkyrie streaks through the storm, opening up on the Demon Prince with the assistance of a laser targeter handled by the young Cadian sniper. Heavy bolt of fire from the Valkyrie tore through Apelionis' freshly sprouted membranous wings, whilst a missile, at first seeming to miss, landed a yard from the creature, opening the ground up beneath it. A follow-up salvo from the gun cutter's multi-laser saw roiling molten flames erupt over the creature, sloughing its armoured shell down to pale meat before Apillionis disappeared completely into the ground below the plinth that was to be his place of ascension. Despite the fact Apillionis is slain, Ursula is not free of peril as yet. At the moment of her disembarkation, whilst Ursula and the penal legionnaire seek out the landing craft where the majority of the team are waiting, the Major, her aide and longtime friend Gideon Argent, betrays her, acting at the behest of secretive, powerful allies within the Imperium. He attempts to steal the data crystal and kill Ursula in the process, stating he will no longer dance to her tune and that it is his time for his own ascension. Ultimately, though, he is thwarted by the young sniper who, whilst the traitorous officer places the barrel to Ursula's forehead, places a well-aimed bolt with her long lass through the Major's lower jaw. Back in the void, Ursula is in conversation with the Lord Regent Guilliman, and though light years separated the two, the Lord Castellan could feel the Primarch's authority bearing down upon her. Someone had placed her father's long coat on the vessel for her to discover upon Ursula's return from Cadia. For all those stacked against the Lord Castellan, there seemed she had her own hidden allies. Her Mechanicus Engineer had not yet retrieved the contents of the data crystal, given it was a delicate process. The Primarch announces that if the information contained within is indeed what Ursula stated, then it is more valuable than any weapon. When Ursula inquires whether Roboute will allow her to recall the Cadian regiments currently deployed elsewhere to found a new Cadian system, a task which would require a great many soldiers, Roboute answers that he would give the request consideration once the full facts are known. The Primarch also inquires as to how Ursula's injured companions fare now they have been through the bowels of hell and survived. The penal legionnaire Ossian was not only injured, but also under the toxic effects of Svendsen, something Ursula had to inflict upon the man, just to give him strength enough to make the final voyage to the Valkyrie after Major Argent's demise. The young sniper Lascari was relieved of her arm up to the right shoulder, as the result of being infected with Nurgle's rot through the bite of a poxwalker. The nervous, naive young trooper had well and truly earned her place among the shock troops of Cadia. All others had been patched and were awaiting an ecclesiastical purity check before their release from the infirmary. Though Guilliman admitted he was not aware of Argent's traitorous intent, he did state there was always those who wished to place their own goals above the Imperium. He also admitted that the Catachan Sergeant Harappa in Ursula's squad, a handy man to have around indeed, and one who knew entirely too much regarding the threat of the demon, was in fact an Inquisition plant. When Ursula seeks a pardon from Roboute for Ossian, the penal legionnaire, the Primarch states in no uncertain terms she has the authority to grant such requests, a sign that the Primarch is imparting significant power upon the Lord Castellan, but we all know that with that comes great responsibility. Cadia had indeed fallen, but the greatest martial people to ever fight for the Imperium would rise again. Ursula would make sure it happened. Now there is some new lore I haven't included within the story, as I stated at the beginning, and I think most will agree there's a particularly obvious narrative that will be expanded upon in future Ashes of Cadia novels. Okay, so when we first listened to this novel, I think it's easy to be underwhelmed by the new lore it contains compared to the likes of Penitent, Lion Son of the Forest, or Cypher Lord of the Fallen, but this is simply not the case, so make sure you listen on and comment with your thoughts. You know I reply to all comments and aim to build a community, so don't be shy. It's been a long time since I listened to Fall of Cadia, so if you recognise lore tidbits in here connecting to that novel, make sure you leave a comment. Before we get into this, I think we should make it clear to those who are unaware that to be Lord Castellan of Cadia, is a huge responsibility. Not only are you the ultimate military authority for an entire planet of martial people, you also fill the role traditionally done so by a planetary governor. In Ursula's case, this is made even more difficult by the fact that her people are scattered throughout many war zones, some of them essentially not even reporting to her. To pull so many from active conflicts, further unite them again as one people, given so many other regiments have been brought into Cadian ones, then fend off the naysayers and schemers who were secretly rallying against her, while simultaneously forging a new Cadian empire in the system scouted by her father and Krell. This task is almost insurmountable. I'm not sure how Ursula will achieve this in one lifetime, but I'm excited to find out. I hope this lends some perspective to the epic responsibility that now rests upon Ursula's shoulders accompanying her father's great coat. Now getting into some more of the lore detailed in Creed, Ashes of Cadia, let's discuss the most exciting one first. That is the weapon against chaos. I could hear a few people's eyes roll into their heads when revealing the contents of Creed's bunker. I'll bet lots of people were hoping for some super weapon or STC template. Let me know in the comments what you thought it was. Now the way this could move forward is very interesting. Let's consider Ursula petitioning Roboute for the resources enabling a conquering and subsequent settlement of a new Cadian system. These were scouted by her father before the formation of the Great Rift, so who knows what exists there now. Personally, I suspect that once Ursula has earned the forces she requires to do this, there will be significant searching involved to find one listed within the data crystal which either hasn't been overrun by demons or sucked into the warp. What do you think the next Ashes of Cadia book will bring? Make sure to let me know. As for the fate of the two young girls who Captain Tethys sent with Ursula, these were sisters. The eldest perished soon after the troop fled Tethys tunnels, an avalanche bearing them down and in turn ruining the poor girl's body. Her younger sister perished later in the story, as the remaining members of Ursula's team made good their escape after the death of Apollonius, a corrupted, embittered, penal legionnaire, angry at the young sniper for accidentally killing her friend, slit the throat of the young girl, killing her. It seems the damned planet that Cadia had become was not willing to let any of its people leave. I will just add at this point that of the 36 members of the Mole Rats, there was supposedly a team of 5 on patrol when the forces of Nurgle stormed the hold. We don't ever learn the fate of these few, but perhaps we could use them for our own campaigns or homebrew lore. You be the judge of that. It is no longer possible to be born on Cadia. This much is obvious. To be Cadian, the eldest generation still remember her, the glorious Khazars and their families. Then there are more commonly those born off-world of Cadian heritage, whilst many others labelled Cadian are in fact guardsmen and women, transferred into Cadian regiments to make the numbers up. This variety of origins is actually reflected in Ursula's newly founded 8th Regiment. The old guard were besides herself the Major and Colonel, those born off-world were represented by the young snipers, and finally Katajan's Sergeant Harappa was clearly not of Cadian descent. This was part of a PR campaign where, against Ursula's preference, Servo Skulls was supposed to capture some valiant footage of a quick, victorious insertion to promote morale throughout the wider Imperium, and one would assume to the scattered Cadian regiments who fought in other war zones. This PR campaign evidently did not go to plan. Sergeant Harappa handles himself extremely well, even when facing horrors that pin others, including Ursula, to the spot in shock. Given Harappa was inserted by the Inquisition, one would assume he is either a Katajan vet, hand-selected for this mission, having fought against heretical filth prior, or is a member of an inquisitorial retinue sent by his master to keep an eye on Ursula and report what he finds on Cadia, as well as within Ursarkar's vault. Even though we didn't explain it within the main body of the video, Ursula and the penal legionnaire Ossian develop a love connection. I think it could be explained as a grim dark 40k love affair, given Ossian is a condemned criminal criminal in a jumpsuit with a penal tattoo burnt into his forehead, and Ursula is a passionate, war-torn, almost weary leader destined to be the saviour of her people. They do kiss, however at the end of the novel, Ossian is in a bad state, being operated upon with his fate not yet revealed, though his pardon seems all but assured. When Ursula is first asked by Roboute Guilliman to decide on whether she would make planetfall to Cadia, she was first ready to refuse, politely of course. The main reason for this is because she had achieved so much within her career, had gone to great efforts to separate herself from her father's legacy. Ursula had decided she would not allow herself to be swept into a suicidal mission in his name. Before she was able to deliver this final decision to the Primarch Guilliman, he spoke to her quite candidly about his own experience living up to a father's legacy. Speaking privately with the Primarch in this way helps Ursula to reconsider her choice. A little Easter egg within the novel was that when the mole rats and Ursula were making good their escape from the huntsman after exiting Creed's vault, they travelled through an ancient subterranean cave system. Upon the walls were paintings millennia old of tribespeople raising their arms to the heavens towards the Eye of Terror in either worship or war. There were horned creatures the sappers believed to be long extinct animals. During Creed's hololithic message, he even states their people were around since before the Imperium. Considering this, it makes sense that the ordinary folk do not know Cadia was resettled after Lorgar's extermination of the corrupted tribespeople during the Great Crusade. Therefore, they are not aware that the people existing on Cadia some 10 millennia prior were all chaos-worshipping savages. Obviously, we know the paintings on the cave walls were not reaching for the Emperor, but rather towards the Eye of Terror and the Chaos Pantheon, and those horned creatures were not the local fauna, but rather demons. I just thought this was a neat addition and added flavour to the story, as it's probably unlikely we'll see a return to Cadia in the future, one would assume. Now guys, not only is the Inquisition involved, there is a mysterious character with an ill temper who has a psyker read the Emperor's tarot, attempting to ordain whether Ursula's party would be successful or not. When the reading turns out to be incorrect and Ursula is successful, this seeming villain is infuriated, beating the psyker badly. Remember guys that Roboute informs Ursula that there are powerful enemies within the Imperium who oppose both her and himself, a fact we have known for quite some time, especially considering the events of the Regent's Shadow novel. It is interesting, that point being continued into this novel, and I'm looking forward to seeing how Roboute and Ursula's camaraderie develops. Now, it's hurting my brain, but maybe one of you guys remembers. In the fall of Cadia, when Creed swoops into the Rosvar Mountains and speaks to that Cadian officer, was that Tethys? It's been years since I listened to that in audiobook format and can't for the life of me recall now. But let me know. For our more avid listeners, you'll notice this video wasn't as comprehensive a narrative breakdown as Genefather, Leviathan, or Cypher Lord of the Fallen, all of which you can find linked in the description below. The reason for that is, besides this being a good book, is it was more of a running shooter style novel and not many revelations between doses of Poxwalker murder. Hence I've just included more of the relevant bits and expanded on them. If you do enjoy our longer story style content, I've linked our most recent ones in the description below, all of which contain spoilers, so I think you'll love them. As I've said before, the best part of doing YouTube has been interacting with you guys, hearing your own speculation and feedback, so crack on down to the comment section and let me know your thoughts on the video, the lore, or just to say hi. Each like, share and comment helps the machine spirit that is YouTube's algorithm to grow our channel and community. It also isn't cheap to buy equipment and supplies, and the time I dedicate to creating videos goes beyond anything YouTube AdSense pays me. So if you want to give back but also become part of a community where we hobby and game together, including of course with me personally, then head on over to Patreon and check out our various tiers of membership. They start very cheap, and they're created to form a tight-knit, fun-loving community, with me included, in it all, for the ride with you. So if that sounds like something you can get behind, go check it out, the link's in the description. Lastly, saving money on Warhammer is great, saving 21% is better. To support myself and the local business, check out our link to Gap Games in the description. Brent and the team also do a weekly draw if you purchase something, which they share on their Facebook page, giving you free credit to buy more. As the channel grows, I want to offer this service of saving money on hobby goods to countries out of Australia and New Zealand, so watch this space. As always, I really appreciate you guys and I hope this was entertaining for you. Until next week, take it easy and have a good one.